It's the Fitness Lab Pittsburgh podcast, a new episode every week. A podcast about movement, part of making your life complete. Fitness Lab Pittsburgh, aka FitLabPGH, brings you interviews with people in the Pittsburgh area who understand movement is part of what makes life complete. Looking for a new movement idea or just want to hear interesting stories about people who make movement a priority? This is the podcast for you. Whether you consider the gym, dojo, or fitness studio your third place, or just want to learn more about movement, activity, and fitness to enhance your life, give FitLabPGH a listen. We interview locals in the Pittsburgh area who make Pittsburgh a great place to move. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Subscribing is free and gives you notifications when we release new episodes. Each podcast episode will be long enough to pique your interest and short enough to hold your attention. Have an idea for an episode? Know somebody we should interview? Or just want to connect with us? Drop us an email, fitlabpgh@gmail.com, or follow us on Twitter or Instagram at FITLABPGH. Already a fan of FitLabPGH? Check out our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast for movement professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers weekly interviews with movement professionals featuring topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope you enjoy our next interview, starting now. FitLabPGH and our sister podcast, Moving to Live, firmly believe that movement should be treated as a lifestyle, not just an activity. That's why FitLabPGH, in addition to our podcast, releases movement tip and lifestyle hack videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and every Thursday we do a written FitLabPGH features. If you have an idea for a FitLabPGH features person or four-legged friend, or you have an idea for a movement tip and lifestyle hack, connect with us on social media. Drop us a line and let us know what you propose. If you like what we're doing, leave us some feedback on Apple Podcasts or tell us what you like on social media. FitLabPGH back with another podcast. We crossed a bridge, but we did not go through a tunnel today. We are at the Rivers Club. We are talking to Kevin Ferra, who is an executive recruiter, but he has another job, kind of a man who wears two hats or two capes. He's the owner of or founder of Therapy Dogs of Pittsburgh, which he's going to tell us about because as a podcast, we believe that movement should be treated as a lifestyle, not an activity. And just from chatting with Kevin, you can pretty clearly see that by the choices he's made in his life, movement is not only a lifestyle, it's kind of a requirement unless he's going to hole up in his apartment. So Kevin, thanks for taking time to talk to FitLabPGH.
Thanks for having me.
One of the things we always like to find out when we talk to FitLabPGH people is, are you a Pittsburgh native? If so, why the heck are you still here? If not, what brought you here?
So, yes, I am a Pittsburgh native, and believe it or not, I feel like I've lived two lives. The first 20 years of my life, I was never on an airplane, and I was never even in Cleveland or Philadelphia. However, in the past 20 years, I've been to 71 countries, some of them multiple times, and I feel like I've gone around the world just telling people how great Pittsburgh is. So I'm one of the outlier. I very much am happy to be home here in Pittsburgh, and I love all four seasons.
And I know from talking to you prior to starting recording, you spent a fair amount of time living overseas. Was it always a plan to come back home to Pittsburgh, or when you started traveling, was it like, oh, Pittsburgh was nice, but now I'm going to see the world?
Great question. I think initially I had no idea really where life was going to take me. But the more and more I saw around the world, I realized how much, I loved about Pittsburgh and missed about the city, but I had to make it work for me in terms of who I've become as an adult versus that, the first 20 years and what I experienced. It's quite different how I enjoy Pittsburgh now.
And I know a lot of people like to complain about Pittsburgh traffic. You haven't complained about it, but you made a conscious choice when you moved back to Pittsburgh. You made the decision not to have a car.
Yes.
And I know when you came back to Pittsburgh, you also researched as far as what type of dog you wanted. So when you made the decision to come back to Pittsburgh, at what point did you say, I'm going to move back to Pittsburgh, but I'm going to be atypical and I'm not going to have a car? I mean, if you live in New York City, most people don't have cars unless they live in the outlying boroughs or have lots and lots and lots of money. You commented it was cheaper to have a boat than a car, but how did you come up with the decision? It's like, you know what? I'm not going to have a car.
Well, when I first returned home, I was living overseas for 7 years, and I do recruitment in healthcare and higher education. And I started a recruitment firm, Ferra Executive Search. And when you start anything of your own, it's your own money, finances, time, all that sort of kind of goes in with that. So as I'm based and I live near Market Square, I started to look at the expense of having a car in terms of parking, the insurance, and then how infrequently I would potentially even use that vehicle. And I decided to see how long I could go without having a car. And what I've realized is it's the best decision that I could have ever have made for me. I work from home, so I don't have to deal necessarily with a daily morning or afternoon commute, but I do have the opportunity every day to use that time differently, which is why I decided to get a dog and not your typical city apartment dog. I have a Panda Shepard, she's essentially a German Shepherd with a different color pattern, but no different in terms of what type of dog she is in terms of her physical needs. We average 7 to 10 miles a day, and that's typically you can find us walking anywhere in the city. Depending on the time of day, we might use different paths. In the sort of the busy part of the day, we'll use the river trails. We're crossing bridges all the time, maybe not like most Pittsburghers. We're usually waving at the traffic as we're walking past it. So it's one of my favorite things to do is actually cross the variety of different bridges that we have here.
What are people's comments, impressions, or thoughts when you tell them you don't have a car?
They ask me, how do I get around? And I often say I have these crazy wheels, and I point to my feet. And that always gets a chuckle out of everyone. And I do that year round. In fact, my favorite time to walk is in the winter. The colder, the better. For me, you can dress and warm up as you're walking, and then you have the peace of really an uncrowded path along the way. So I enjoy that. I think the other thing from a work standpoint, I occasionally will get questions about, well, you just came from a conference in another city or another state. And I explain to them there are these great rental car services for those periods of time. And of course I use Uber and Lyft and Zipcar and other forms of transportation, but primarily it's a bicycle and my own feet.
So it'd be fair to say you're living a lifestyle that is not atypical in some larger cities like Chicago and New York, but maybe hasn't reached Pittsburgh for the general person who's living within the city.
Yes, and if anything, I have learned in all my travels, it's to bring these little nuggets of things from other cities that are working quite well in terms of their people and their community and creating that active lifestyle and bringing it back here and figuring out how to make it part of the new Pittsburgh that I want.
And I'm curious, growing up, were you an active kid? Were you somebody who walked everywhere? Mom and dad said, get out of the house and do something? Or was this something that when you started traveling overseas, you used walking and other human motivation or human movement ways to see where you were?
Yeah, so great question. Growing up, I was a kid that was always in the woods. I was behind our house. I was in the streams. I was turning over rocks. I always had dogs, although we weren't really allowed to have them off leash with us. My mom in particular wasn't too trustworthy of the dog staying by my side, even though every time I did let the dog out, he certainly would stay by the side and come back. But when I started to travel, one of the things is I would go to explore a different city or country. I would always look for ways in which I could cheaply see that city. So it often led me to renting a bicycle or hiking. I do a lot of hiking when I travel. So I never really hiked in Pittsburgh or in Western Pennsylvania the way I have in other cities and in other countries. So when I came back in 2015, and that's why I have some of these books here, I started to figure out, well, how can I take something that I love and bring it closer to home? And the reality is there's so many great places to hike here.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've mentioned before is the river trails are actually all of the rails to trails in the Pittsburgh area are a vastly unrecognized gem. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people miss that even within the city limits, or even if you get an hour outside of the city. I don't live an hour outside the city. I'm 18 miles from the center of the Liberty Bridge, and Mingo Creek Park is just one place that there is phenomenal. If you get off the paved trail and off in the woods, you would think you were way out in the middle of nowhere, and yet you can walk 20 minutes down the hill and there's a place where you can get cell phone coverage.
That's actually mentioned in this book here. That's how I had a chance to first explore that park as well as a bunch of others. And for me, I can go to any dog park. I have, I think, a dual responsibility in my professional life, as I often am involved with helping people relocate to the area, to understand options that might be closer to their neighborhood or better for them. And a lot of people that I'm recruiting in higher education or healthcare, they tend to bring a family with them, and that family usually includes a dog or some sort of reason where they're going to have to figure out some exercising options. In fact, I'm actually helping right now someone that has relocated from Boston actually to Pittsburgh to work for one of the universities here, and she recently told me one of her favorite things to do is to go hiking. I said, well, where do you hike in Pittsburgh? She said she hasn't. She doesn't know where to go yet. So they've been here now for her and her husband for close to 4 months. And she told me he's gained 20 to 30 pounds as a result of this. So I said, I'm going to get you some books. I'm going to take you hiking. There are lots of options here. And from my experience, retention is very closely tied to recruitment. You're more likely to get a happy, engaged employee and family life if the person understands that a job isn't just a relationship between an employee and a company. It's a relationship between the employee, the company, their family, and this new location, wherever they might be.
And I'm curious, in your job as a recruiter, how often or how common is it for people that you're recruiting or for employers who are looking for somebody to recognize the importance of, in the case of this particular woman, hiking, or maybe you've got somebody who says, my activity is I play squash, or I'm a cyclist. How often does that come up in either the recruitment process or when you're working for a company and they say, we need your help to find an individual? Do either of them ever bring it up?
It often is, I would say, 60% of the entire recruitment process in terms of questions that I am asked by a candidate. And usually when I say candidate, I mean their family as well. Most of the searches that I'm recruiting, you're recruiting at a level in which you're expecting the person to have a spouse, have children of various ages, have animals, and all of the questions that you get, at least from a recruitment standpoint, tend to be beyond the job. So tell me about the school districts. Tell me about where, what kind of parks, where can I use my bicycle? I like to run in a marathon. Does Pittsburgh have a marathon? All those kind of things. Quite frankly, I know if I don't get those questions, it's not a candidate that's seriously interested in relocating.
So it's kind of you get some insight by the questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm also curious, as somebody who lived in the Pittsburgh area, left, and then came back. Have you seen changes in the Pittsburgh area? I mean, everybody talks about, it's a cleaner city. They're expanding. There's new houses. There's more things to do downtown. Have you noticed a difference in people moving more and making a conscious choice? Because what you're doing is, we're not interviewing you and say, hey, Kevin, you're a hiker, or hey, Kevin, you're a cyclist, or you're a boater. You're making a conscious choice that movement is your lifestyle, because otherwise you can't get to the Rivers Club to do your work, because this is kind of your satellite office. You can't get to the dog park. You can't get to the grocery store, etc. How many people like you are there that you've come across since you've moved back?
Not as many as I'd like yet, but I definitely see that there's momentum. This podcast is a good example of that. And I think there's a culture of change in smaller pockets, whether it's the cycling community, the dog hiking community, or even the boating community, which is something that's used to be new to me. Now I've been boating for the past 4 years here. And I can even say, even in the past 4 years on the water, how many more Pittsburghers I see out on the water for the first time ever in their life. And they may have been the Pittsburgher that previously would say to me, "Ooh, don't go near the water. It's disgusting." And now they're on a kayak, or they're using a pedal boat, or they're figuring out other ways in which they can kind of explore a newer Pittsburgh. But not everyone's at the point where they're going to feel comfortable walking from downtown, for example, to Waterworks Mall, which I've done multiple times over. It's actually an easy walk straight on the Riverwalk through Millville, Sharpsburg, and you're there. But it takes time. I can do a few phone interviews as I'm going. As long as they understand, they might hear my dog barking occasionally.
You mentioned something when we were talking before I started recording that I thought was fascinating. I think listeners might too. You've actually discovered that it's cheaper to have a boat. We're not talking a kayak, but have a boat than a car. And you kind of use a boat as your transportation during 4 or 5 months of the year. Kind of describe that, because to me, I've read books about people doing that in areas like San Francisco, but I never heard it being done in Pittsburgh. And I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. So this was sort of a lifelong dream of mine. I grew up in Pittsburgh, sort of always looking at the boats on the water and never ever having the experience of going out on one. So when I actually bought my boat, it was the first time I ever was out on the rivers here in Pittsburgh. So I had to figure out, how I was going to incorporate this into my new lifestyle. So I dock at the Southside Marina, and I live near Market Square, which is almost entirely front to back. I can walk or bicycle there without any interruption of a car. I can cross the Smithfield Street Bridge, and then I can take the river trail on that side of the Monongahela River, or I can use the Furnace Trail behind PNC to cross the Hot Metal Bridge. Either way, it's about a 5-mile loop for me to get kind of front and back. My cost is lower from an insurance standpoint. From a parking or docking standpoint, my annual cost of having a car in town versus a docking slip at the Southside Marina, it's significantly less to do that. And then from just even in terms of parking downtown, if you park on the street, it's $4 an hour, but you can dock a boat even at Point State Park, and that's free throughout the day. So often I'll park or dock in town, take my dog home, or end up here at the Rivers Club for a few hours, and then later on in the evening, take the boat back over with my dog, and we'll run or walk back.
And I think what's interesting also is you mentioned that depending on what your responsibilities are for your job, you also can use your boat as a mobile office and actually be out on the water, which I can imagine is much more relaxing, even than being in a room where we are, where there's a life-size dinosaur head behind your head.
Yes. Quite frankly, the boat has turned out to be the best mobile office I could have ever asked for. On days in which I'm interviewing heavily, it's a cabin cruiser. So there's a table and a little kitchenette underneath it. I can line up 7, 8 calls, drop anchor, and I can do those calls with internet connection, actually free in town, multiple different spots. You can pick it up near the point. And I can make my calls completely uninterrupted and without actually not nearly as many distractions as I would have in any other sort of office environment. And then my favorite is I do recruitment in healthcare and higher education nationally, and in some cases still internationally. In Pittsburgh, we have quite a presence in the eds and meds world, and these folks are busy. And as much as they might want to talk to someone in recruitment, it's easier if I can convince them to meet me in an unusual meeting location. So quite often we'll do a happy hour or a lunchtime, just sort of cruise around the water, which I'll use it as a floating meeting. And I've actually used it a couple times, which is sort of unique to Pittsburgh. I love our convention center right on the water. You can dock right outside the convention center. So I did a search last year for George Mason University, and a couple of people that were on the search committee were here for a higher education conference. They have never, not only have they never been to the city of Pittsburgh before, but they also have never been out on the water here. So I told them just to invite a couple of people from the conference, and I just got some wine and some cheese, and I picked them up for a little sunset cruise, probably about 20 minutes out on the water, but I know that was a more memorable experience than if we were to, as cool as this space is here, were to come in here.
And I know what else I found interesting is you said you have family up near Sharpsburg, and you can just hop in the boat and ride up to Sharpsburg and then get on your bike or walk. What was the impression of your family the first time you did that? Did they think that was cool, or did they say, man, you're crazy, Kevin?
The latter. In all cases, and this is sort of a running theme in my life, I'm the middle of three, and I think this is the middle child syndrome coming out, in which I seek attention, I guess, in different ways. So my brother and sister, 2 years, my brother's 2 years older, my sister's 2 years younger. They're from Pittsburgh, never left Pittsburgh, lived 10 minutes from where my parents and all of us grew up. I, on the other hand, sort of went a different path very early on, which at first in my life, they thought I was crazy. Now it's just, that's Kevin is sort of the speak to it. And I think they appreciate it. They appreciate that I've figured it out. And in some cases, they're my biggest fans, and they're the person that might say something to me like, "How are you doing that?" or "Why are you doing that?" But they'll be the first person to say to their friend, "Look what he's doing."
And I would imagine if they have kids, you're the cool uncle because you do things that mom and dad don't normally do.
Yeah, so I have 3 nephews, and I often am, I think in their world, they're 10, 8, and a year and a half. I'm more of a bigger brother than I am the uncle for now. And what's great about it is it gets them to think about life a little bit differently. And I love the question that often when they were younger, they would ask me, which is my favorite interview question: why? And I use it as a fundamental challenge to anybody on really kind of any norm, but I use it quite often with Pittsburghers that may have had a memory of what Pittsburgh once was that is sticking with them today, and it's far from reality. So I asked them why they're still sort of not willing to give it a second chance.
We're talking to Kevin Ferra. He was introduced to us by the owner of one of our FitLab Pittsburgh features, which is a dog. So you can check out our website. We feature individuals and dogs who make movement a lifestyle. And one of the things that initially interested us is the fact that you are the founder of Therapy Dogs of Pittsburgh. So you are, along with me, believing that dogs are not just accoutrements. Very clearly, you've described that you've set your life up so your dogs probably have the 3rd and 4th best lives of dogs in Western Pennsylvania. I think my dogs will say they get it better, but all 4 dogs could argue it out. What is Therapy Dogs of Pittsburgh?
Yeah, so it's evolving. I tell people often we're a pilot program, and by that I mean we're still trying to figure out exactly what we're trying to do. Initially, I was looking to just have a therapy dog myself, and so my grandma had dementia and had passed from that. So I wanted to get a dog that I could take to nursing homes with potentially patients that would be suffering from dementia. And I wanted to give her a name that would be potentially memorable for an audience that was losing their memory. So I named my dog Oprah, and she's a Panda German Shepherd. And for those of you that have a German Shepherd, or if you've ever been around one, you know that up until they're probably, I'm hearing 3, but so far at least at 2, she's not ready to be next to someone that has limited mobility, or that wants a dog that is laying on their lap. So I sort of had a mismatch with my idea a bit until I read an article in the local paper about the top 10 Instagram dogs in Pittsburgh. And when I read this article now 2 years ago, I found a couple of dogs that were really interesting. One, Nellie Nose, and at Nellie Nose is the Instagram handle. Nellie Nose is a golden retriever here locally in the area that has over 90,000 followers because of all the things that Nellie can balance on her nose. And I started to realize that this account was actually therapeutic for me. It was just making me smile, and I looked forward to seeing what Nellie was going to do the following day. I also noticed that one of the other dogs that was listed was Archie the Cheese Doodle. And Archie, at the time, was a therapy dog in training. So I started to think about all these dogs and dog owners in the Pittsburgh area that were doing really cool things that were making my life better. And I was trying to connect it to my professional life, because when you're starting any kind of business, there is no separation. Your professional life is your entire life. So I was trying to weave in things, I guess, that I found personally interesting into that world. So visiting or recruiting universities and hospitals means I visit universities and hospitals quite a bit. So do therapy dogs. So I reached out to Archie the Cheese Doodle and said, what do you think about creating something here in Pittsburgh in which we could partner to offer training support and services to owners like you that do great things with your dogs, and then to really help you once your dog becomes certified to understand where to go. And we were fortunate because one of the owners of the Dog Stop, which that's a national franchise, but they're headquartered here in Pittsburgh. I walk once a week to take Oprah to her training in the Strip District location, which is about 1.5 miles on the River Trail or Penn Avenue, or whichever way I decide to take that particular day. We like to go through the Strip District itself because it's nice people watching, if you ask me. The owner of the Dog Stop Training Center, in particular, he has German Shepherds himself. He really liked the idea of connecting really good owners and offering this as a resource. So he donated his expertise, the Dog Stop Strip District Training Center facility, and he's fully on board. Once a month, we meet as a group. And when I say we, my dog and my girlfriend's dog, that's 2 of what has become 21 dogs, 19 of which we are sponsoring for their therapy dog training and certification. So basically the concept is, while you're in training, we'll give you once a month some basically in-person training and some distance things that the individual and their dog can practice. We also do some fun things in that process, and we do fundraising using the dog's followers to help us raise funds for everything like the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation here locally, and really try our best to connect with the student that isn't on campus anymore because they're a distance learner, or the patient that isn't in the hospital anymore because they're a home care patient. And having had the experience, I know that there's great therapy dog programs, but I wanted to see if technology could help us reach folks that previously may have been missed. And we do know it is working. There are patients and their families that reach out to us, can ask us to do something special for their kids or for a loving family member. And we actually have patients that directly follow the account and are asking everything for us to recognize something special in their life or to highlight some of them have dogs themselves. So it's been really kind of a neat pilot program, and I keep saying pilot program because it's an experiment. The initial idea has sort of ballooned into now 21 dogs, and we'll see that continue to grow. The thought is once you graduate, we're going to look to replace you as in the training standpoint in the graduate state part of the program. And in fact, we just had 2 dogs this past week get certified. So if there is anyone out there that is listening, we will be looking for a couple of local Pittsburgh Instagram dog stars to join a good cause and potentially join the Therapy Dogs of Pittsburgh.
It's almost like you're using your program as a T-ball training and Therapy Dogs is Little League or American Legion baseball before they're ready to actually play hardball or be quote-unquote official Therapy Dogs. They can still do the same sorts of things in a different manner.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. And I often tell anyone that I have had great dog owners tell me my dog will never be a therapy dog because he's just way too hyper. And I say, take a look at Oprah because she is the worst of the bunch. But what she brings is something I think that is often missed in a traditional therapy dog visit. She has about 60 commands down solid, all of them in which anything from throwing a Frisbee to scent training to I can fake shoot her and she spins and she's got a whole bunch of different things that people are engaged and interested in, but she can do that through technology now in a way to reach those folks that before those people are right. She isn't the dog that's going to sit comfortably next to a patient. But as I'm learning, even the traditional concept of a therapy dog to me in my head is different than the reality. Some of our dogs that aren't even the best equipped for that environment in terms of going to a nursing home and sitting next to a patient, well, maybe they're a really good fit for the airport because at the airport, it's huge and you get to walk all around and get tired out, but you're there as patients are traveling all across the country and potentially world for who knows. It could be a good reason. It could be a bad reason, but hopefully you're distracting them just a little bit.
And I'm curious, are there ever any plans to put a live camera on Oprah while she's doing Frisbee so somebody could maybe search and watch a live video feed of Oprah chasing Frisbees?
That's a new one, a live feed. I think I'll definitely consider that. The 2 new things that I have to add is a drone. So it has a follow me button. So I'm going to actually have the drone follow me either on the water. So when I'm in the boat, and she'll catch the Frisbee right off the back when I throw it off into the river from the back of the boat, or walking from town to the park, and then while I'm in the park, it should, in theory, hover above me. Although I have to say, I'm too afraid to actually try it yet because I'm afraid I'm going to break it. So I haven't yet, but yeah, I think from a Frisbee standpoint, I'm not sure who likes the time we spend in the park together more, her or me. When she catches it, it is like I just threw a touchdown pass, and I joke with my friends that I'm going to become the Kenny Powers of Frisbee dog. And if you don't know who Kenny Powers is, just Google Kenny Powers, and you'll see a little bit. He's certainly someone that. One of his favorite lines is, or my favorite lines of his is, he plays real sports. He doesn't want to take first place in exercising. So I'm that sort of the same way. When I'm walking, it's with a purpose. I'm going somewhere. And when I'm in the park, same with my dog, I can't just sit around or kind of huddled together. My dog's active in the park as well with the Frisbee.
We've been talking with Kevin Ferra. He's the founding partner of Ferra Executive Search and the founder of Therapy Dogs of Pittsburgh. I know one of the things people often say, if they're going to be successful, they need to do something either better than other people or different. And I think for somebody who likes to move. Kevin's definitely found a better way to move if he's going to live in a city environment. And I think he's doing it differently in a positive way. Kevin, I want to thank you for taking time to talk to FitLab Pittsburgh and explain how you treat movement as a lifestyle, not just an activity.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of FitLabPGH, brought to you by Moving to Live. Intro and exit music is Marathon Man by Jason Shaw. Check out the show notes for contact info for our latest guests, links to other information mentioned in the episode, and links to our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast about movement and exercise for professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. You can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Your free subscription gets you notified when we release a new episode. Questions, comments, suggestions? Email us at fitlabpgh@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter and Instagram at fitlabpgh and like us on Facebook. If you enjoy our podcasts, please tell your friends about us and consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Make FitLabPGH a go-to place to learn more about movement in the Pittsburgh area. Until next time, keep on moving.